If his beef is with the way things currently are, I don't see why that would be, but I only see that as an outsider. So take that for what it's worth, which is very, very little.
Right.
As is everything I say. Why am I here? I don't know.
But let's start, Mark, with the Chicago Bulls, because when you and I did the live stream on YouTube, we only saw the Lonzo Ball news. A day later, it was announced that DeMar DeRozan is joining the Chicago Bulls via a sign and trade. He got, I think, 3 years and $82 million, which does seem like an overpay for someone of his caliber. But a lot of people have reasoned that this is the price of doing business and getting back into relevance if you're the Bulls. Do you agree with that assessment?
It is kind of the price of doing business if it's the price that DeRozan refused to sign less at. If it was signed for any less for. However, I'm not quite sure who the Bulls were outbidding because, like you said, cap space was gone. There wasn't exactly a great deal of sign and trade partners out there. If there were, we didn't know about them. And the 27 and a bit million average per annum cost that you're paying for DeRozan is a price point reflective of his past, not his future. This man is aging quite well, but also aging. I mean, he's done 12 years now in the NBA. Increasingly without a position. He played the 4 last year, which is fine in theory, but you give up rim protection and rebounding. If he plays the 4 for the Bulls, then you're going to have to worry about a front court of DeRozan and Vucevic defensively. I don't like it, if I'm honest. I don't mind the acquisition of DeRozan in the sense that it's a huge infusion of talent on a team that didn't have sufficient talent for these last few years.
Right.
And there was a use it or lose it thing going on there with Satoransky's contract, with Aminu. And Lord knows that having made the move for Vucevic, they clearly are prioritizing some kind of significant short-term improvement to get themselves out of the lottery picture and constantly picking ninth. But that doesn't mean it had to be DeRozan. It doesn't mean it had to be DeRozan at that price. There will be significant offensive diversity to come with that. There is the potential between him and Vucevic and also Lonzo up to a point to get Zach LaVine in the offensive role that will better suit him. It's not that he can't be the guy, but when he is the guy, these all-around game suffers. He may flourish from that. The Bulls may go on to win 45-50 if you're optimistic. But then what?
Right. That's the big question being asked. I think a lot of Bulls fans right now are basically satisfied just with a competitive product as a first step kind of scenario. Most are insinuating that the current roster needn't be the same roster in 2 years' time. I personally do find it somewhat difficult to find proper trade ideas out there for DeRozan. I don't think you're going to get a positive return on his contract at the very least. So you may have to sit through that one because as far as I know, the entire 3 years are fully guaranteed. So there isn't any little thing you can do in year 3 where he's like partial guaranteed or it's a team option. It seems like they are going to be I was about to say stuck with him. I don't think that phrasing is quite right, but it does seem like they are going to be together for at least 3 years, right?
I don't know about the full 3, but the fact that it is a 3-year deal is a virtue. There is no such thing as an untradeable contract when it's in its final final 24 months. We've seen this time and again. We've seen it with Russell Westbrook now twice. Okay, they're not great deals, but they're deals. We even saw it with what was the most outlandish contract back in the day, Rashard Lewis. That got dealt. Gilbert Arenas, that got dealt. Yeah, they got dealt for each other, but they got dealt. Nothing's immovable. Now, I'm not putting a projection of DeRozan's contract into that sphere. It's not as if he's going to suddenly stop being good. He's not.
Right.
It is, however, a cost-benefit analysis when you consider the cost of A, his actual salary, B, the stuff given up in trade, which wasn't nothing. I mean, they were useful assets in some kind of deal, and C, the lost opportunities to make future deals. That is all quite significant there. It all adds up. It's not all exactly objectively measurable either, but it is there. And so, given all that, you need to be pretty sure that DeMar DeRozan is going to make your team in the short, medium, and hopefully even long-term futures significantly better to justify it. And I don't know if that's the play you're getting. However, in a bid to be positive, you are going to get someone who's going to significantly improve the team with his offensive game, his unorthodox offensive game that continues to work. There is that. The Bulls just to repeat what I said before, because it is the primary motivation here, I'm sure, do get a significant infusion of talent of a man who was very recently an all-star. They've now done that twice in a few months. That is out of character. That is a huge leap forwards. When we normally, if we talk about deals of such caliber, of such a status with other teams, we worry that they're mortgaging the future. The Bulls didn't really do that, because whilst they've given up some future assets and future flexibility, none of it was premium. So they haven't mortgaged the future to improve the present. And as the people you were talking about there described, the roster will look very different in 2 years' time. Every roster looks different in 2 years' time. There's no point going, this is our core for 5 years, because it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Ask Lauri Markkanen. However, even then, even with all those caveats in place, at his price point for his game, I don't like it. I think 3 years and 60 is probably where he should be. And that 7-8 million per annum difference is most of an MLE. So it's it's a significant difference.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about as well in regards to that contract is there you had a lot of people with league sources come out afterwards and say, well, part of the reason that contract was so substantial could have been because the Bulls and Derozan agreed to it before free agency launched. And basically they kind of discovered, wow, that we grossly overestimated this market pre-free agency. And like if they had just let the chips fall when they may, they might have ended up getting Derozan for a significantly cheaper deal. Do you buy into that?
Well, it's certainly possible. It would be a pretty bad state of affairs if that were to be something that was investigated in addition to the Lonzo Ball tampering accusations. I mean, of course, things are known beforehand, but it wasn't a. There was a lot of money moved in the in this last free agent market, but rarely, if ever, can you point at a contract and say that's bad, like we've had done in previous years, ones that were bad from the minute go. Whilst a lot of players changed teams and a lot of money was spent, it wasn't spent hugely. There wasn't that kind of money out there, and there wasn't the kind of players that merited it either to a great degree. So compared to the rest of the market and all the contracts we've seen signed in the last 2 weeks, it doesn't look good, that one. It is redeemable. And I can certainly understand that they agreed the price point before they agreed the deal, and you then do kind of have to honor that. But I'm not sure why it all had to be fully guaranteed or non-incentive laden or anything. They haven't given themselves much protection there, other than the fact that it is only for 3 years.
So you mentioned Lauri Markkanen. Let's pivot into him, because obviously he's still on the books, so to speak, in Chicago. He's a restricted free agent. The Dallas Mavericks seem to be sniffing around him, and the Bulls are apparently, according to rumors, I think it was Tim Cato of The Athletic who reported that the Bulls were interested in Maxi Kleber as a trade piece. Does Markkanen make sense for Dallas? Does Maxi Kleber make sense for the Bulls? What do you think?
Markkanen makes sense for Dallas in the sense that he's on a similar timeline to Doncic, and
Right.
he is going to look considerably better offensively when paired with a player like that. The pairing with Porzingis and the idea of them as a trio is a little different, but I wouldn't project too much into Porzingis' long-term future with the team anyway. Hint, hint. In terms of what makes sense for the Bulls, Kleber can help any team make any team better. He's a good role player. He's only a backup, which is not what he's a backup who's older than you think, because he's not been in the NBA very long, but he didn't join it at a young age. He'll provide a few decent years of Tice-like play, which is fine. It's better than nothing. I do understand why Markkanen wants to go. He's openly disenfranchised, and he hasn't really developed. So from the fan base's point of view, it's not going to be a huge loss either. But I would kind of like to see him just go back, and not just on the QO, but on a decent deal, because there's still something there. Even if he doesn't project beyond the player he is today, the player he is today is a fifth starter with a quality outside shot who still has upside and a little bit of versatility to his game. He may not be as good as he allegedly claiming to be in the free agency market, but that's a negotiating tactic. That's different. I'd like to see him come back on a longer term deal. He still has an awful lot to prove, but if his beef was with his time with the Bulls over the last few years, well, it's a new management structure now. It's a new coach. It's, well, apart from last year, it's a new timeline, as we've seen with the aforementioned trades of Vucevic and Derozan. So if that's in the past, perhaps the angst can be left in the past as well.
It does seem like that this issue is closely tied to the current state of affairs. So it would behoove him maybe to move on if that's the case. In which, like, let's assume he ends up in Dallas. By the way, you brought up the pairing with Doncic, and I think that's a very reasonable point to make, because Markkanen has never played with an elite playmaker before. I mean, the Bulls over the past few years has basically operated without a specialized playmaker. That's been a job that everyone has handled like intermittently. And now that he would be going to Dallas, if this scenario plays out, like he'll finally have someone to consistently set him up. I mean, how does that look for his trajectory moving forward?
Well, put it this way, Dallas acquired Tim Hardaway Jr. as a bad 70-something million contract. And have subsequently resigned him as a good 70-something million contract, because given the presence of Doncic, his gravity, and the offensive unit around, which last year wasn't as good, but which we must remember 2 years ago was historically good when they had Seth Curry, suddenly Hardaway and his confident shooting, let's call it, and efficient shooting, of course, suddenly he's now an asset rather than a liability, and a big asset as well, and an adequately paid one. And Markkanen can have all that too. He is not just a shooter, but he is one. He'll be a better one when he's catching 7 passes a game in the pocket, in the corners, and on the wings. He can offer a little bit more beyond that. I do stand by what I said about the less than ideal fit with Porzingis, particularly when it comes to the defensive end. But Porzingis isn't long for that team, surely. So even if he is, it could work in theory. So it would suit Markkanen very, very well. I don't know if there's going to be a particularly good deal that the Bulls can get back. Kleber is solid, yes, but you're giving up on what was your future asset for a backup in his prime. It's not ideal, but it's better than nothing. Kleber is a good player, and he will have resale value himself due to his contract, which isn't even fully guaranteed. So it would suffice. It wouldn't be bad business. I still think there's more that can be gotten out of the Lauri and Chicago situation, but it must be said that I say that as an outsider. Clearly, there is internal, I won't say strife, that's a bit of a grand word, but there's
disagreements.
Discontent, at least, which I cannot even pretend to know the specifics of. If his beef is with the way things currently are, I don't see why that would be, but I only see that as an outsider. So take that for what it's worth, which is very, very little.
Right.
As is everything I say. Why am I here? I don't know. Just to add some blue, I think, to the broadcast.
Yeah, I'll tell my editor. But it's interesting though, because like when you bring up Kleber, when I see Kleber now, I think he would be a tremendous asset for Chicago's second unit in particular. I mean, right now their primary backup at the big spot is Tony Bradley, who I actually think they got on pretty good value, all things considered. 2 years,
very good value, yeah,
right, minimum. Second year's player option, but still, I mean, that's solid value for someone who's just that statistically productive all the time. And they just need a seasoned 4-man, someone who can just play a secondary big role. I mean, I like Marko Simonovic, but I question whether he's ready, especially in a win now system, which I think the Bulls have clearly pivoted into. So Kleber, in that sense, I would imagine, would help things quite considerably if you look at it through the lens of being a bench performer.
I wouldn't go as far as to say considerably, but he will help. He's a good, solid, consistent two-way player, limited, but stays within those limits. A little bit of burst, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of defense. Yeah, he's good. He's pretty good. He's not going to move your needle, though.
Interesting. So let's pivot back to the Mavericks, because one of the things that I wanted to bring you on for as well is basically have a pretty wide discussion in terms of Luka Doncic. Like, how do you build around him? Because it seems like this has been a thing that Dallas fans have really tried to wrap their head around. It's like, how do we optimize Luka? We kind of know what he is, despite the fact that he's only 22. He's going to get better, obviously. Some players with such high intelligence, basketball intelligence, are bound to get better substantially as they age. But we still have this grasp of what he is. So what kind of players should the Mavericks try to identify to bring alongside him? What kind of archetype do you think would fit in Dallas? Or archetypes, maybe?
What's the archetype that fits alongside any ball dominant superstar? You just happen to want a perfectly efficient offensive player who can play on and off the ball and also contribute with defense. The same thing everybody wants, always. However, in Dallas's case, much as Luka is and forever should be the man, his usage rate was enormous. And it's a little bit too enormous. It's not that he doesn't merit it, it's that he's just going to wear down. So a little bit more playmaking, ball handling, pick and roll action, and breaking through the first line of the defense from the backcourt would not go amiss. You also certainly do need shooting alongside that. And like I said, we saw in the, 2019-20 season when they had the historic offensive rating that came from the spacing of Hardaway, of Seth Curry, and others, but particularly those two. So if you could just somehow get both of those with a little bit of interior defense, good luck to you. I don't think they're that far short. I think the Porzingis issue is, it hasn't really progressed. They still are basically taking it in turns in offensively. They're still putting in, look, I'm no coach, I don't know, but I do know the numbers suggest that constantly giving him post up and elbow touches is not the most efficient way. That guy should be running the court on the roll and spotting up. But even then, you'd have issues with Luka having too much half-court creation. So they do need to diversify that beyond just getting Luka to do everything. He doesn't have... I mean, he will break down everyone apart from LeBron does. But they're not that far short of getting the right pieces. And who knows, perhaps some of their younger guards that they have now, Jalen Brunson, Tyrell Terry, could go on to be that.
I mean, it's interesting you go in the direction of guys who are not necessarily bit players. I think that's too harsh. But do you think there is a need for another star player next to Doncic, or is he that specific kind of a player where you actually need to prioritize just fits, even if it isn't fits that comes with all-star titles attached to their names?
Everyone needs a star. I think if Dallas is to win a title, they probably do need that too. However, we need to operate on the basis that might not be possible. Look, if they can get someone like Ben Simmons, all right, that will be good for them if Porzingis adapts accordingly. Markkanen, if they get him, he could potentially grow into that. They may have to grow one from within rather than get one on the market. But yes, they need a star. Everyone needs a star. I was trying to look at how they could take what they've currently got and work the margins so as to be able to enjoy better medium and long-term futures.
Long-term, however, like if Dallas is going to compete at some point in time, they will need to go from hitting in the margins, which I absolutely agree with you, such a wildly important fact, to also swinging big for a star in some capacity, whoever that is. Like personally, I kind of like the idea that is being floated around Dallas Twitter a little bit. Like they know it's not realistic because Paul George is not going anywhere, but it seems like he has been identified as the archetype of player who, again, I realize he's rather unique. Like who else is out there who has a game similar to Paul George?
Paul George like player. Right. There's 10 or 11 to choose from,
Right, but if there are players who at least resemble him in playing style, not necessarily statistical production or star quality, of course, but I understand like the offensive side of the ball, someone who can play off the rock, who can really space the court, but also is athletic enough to get into the paint. Again, just that this is kind of goes back to your point that everyone wants someone who can play on the ball, off the ball, play defense, rebound, pass.
Correct.
Right. And it is extremely and exceedingly difficult to acquire, of course. But
it's why the Clippers paid what they did for George. It's why the Bucks paid what they did for Holiday, because that second tier star who can do a bit of everything without needing to be the man, but who contributes in all other ways on both ends, is invaluable. Dallas needs one. Yes, every team other than Milwaukee needs one, basically. I mean, the Clippers have one, but they need good health. Everyone needs that. Yeah. So Dallas needs that as well. But there does need to be some plan Bs.
Yeah. When I look at their cap sheet and I look at their long-term future, just in terms of trade assets, it doesn't feel like they have a whole lot to offer. Like if a star is made available on the trade market, it does not seem to me as though they can come in and make a substantial offer that can't be trumped by at least a handful of other teams as well. So that's another concern.
Which is why what I was saying about having to adjust your aim downwards, maybe for the best. But look, they've got good players. It's a roster up and down that's good. There's not a weakness there. Right. So it's far from a bad situation to be in. And we've seen now for what, the 350 years that we've been following this sport, quite how much the market can change and how quickly. So, something can and will come up within perhaps even this coming trade deadline, perhaps next summer. So they do need to remain in acquisition mode, but not with any too great sense of urgency, because there's a big window here.
Ironically, Derozan was one of the players who was initially identified as a potential Dallas target. Would he have been? That one. You wouldn't? No.
How
due to the price point, or due to the price point, or due to the talent level, or
the fit? How do you defend anybody with that core of Doncic, Derozan, and let's say Porzingis? They each have their strengths, and there are some decent. Porzingis can protect the rim a little bit. Doncic is no weak link defensively, but that's not competing with the Holiday and Antetokounmpo core. That's not competing with the theoretical Leonard and George core when we talk about superstar two-way cores. So, no, I don't think that would have done.